It's the Channel 5 Movie Club. Tonight, the classic animated feature with the Beatles, Yellow Submarine.
Welcome everybody to the Movie Club. Hi there, I'm Bruce Morrow. I'm your cousin Brucey. I'm kind of happy tonight, and I'm a little nostalgic. I'm happy tonight because we're going to be showing and seeing one of my very, very favorite motion pictures. That motion picture is called Yellow Submarine. Matter of fact, Yellow Submarine not only has the greatest music in the world by the Beatles, but also was one of the very first music videos ever created. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Matter of fact, we first saw this film, you're not going to believe this, 17 years ago. The year was 1968. Can you imagine when you're having such a great time, how time does fly? Well, it's back here again tonight, and you're going to like it. Nostalgia? Well, because I'm thinking about my old friends, the Beatles, and we're standing here in Strawberry Fields, which is just inside the West 72nd Street entrance to Central Park. And this beautiful area was created by funds donated by Yoko Ono, that's John's wife, and the trees and the shrubs around this area are donated by 150 nations all over the world, so everybody has a little bit of Strawberry Fields. It's a lovely place to be. Nostalgia, of course, because tomorrow will mark the 5th anniversary of John Lennon's death, a dedicated man to love and peace and happiness. And you're going to hear that dedication in some of the music tonight. Yellow Submarine, of course. In the town where I was born lived this man who loved the sea. Yellow Submarine. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. My very favorite in the world, of course. Will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64? Now, the Sgt. Pepper Lonely Hearts Club Band, those ugly, disgraceful Blue Meanies, Jeremy, they'll all be here. And when I return, I'm going to have some very interesting guests that are going to talk to me and reminisce about the Beatles and about the film. We're about ready to start the voyage, so as we say, bon voyage, batten down your hatches, here comes the film.
The Beatles' Yellow Submarine will be shown with limited commercial interruptions.
Once upon a time.
Yellow Submarine was released in 1968. Who was President of the United States, and who was elected President during that year? The answer after these messages.
This is the New York Institute of Technology's Video Center in Old Westbury. Not bad, huh? And that's where Al Brodax, the producer and co-writer of Yellow Submarine, works these days. Something that I've always thought about and I always wanted to know, and you have all the answers, Al Brodax.
Yes.
How did you get the Beatles the voices? The voices are so crisp and beautiful.
Oh, matter of the fact is that we didn't. The interesting phenomena, maybe interesting to your viewers, is that the Beatles had a 3-picture deal. This is sort of a back of the scenes happening with UA. They didn't want to do 3 pictures. They were on their India orientation, wanted to go to India. So I did arrange for them to meet with me and talked them into the fact that they didn't have to do a thing. I'd do it all. All I had to do was sign a piece of paper. And we actually got 4 voices from Liverpool, 4 Liverpudlians.
Did you audition in Liverpool?
Oh, yeah. We auditioned in Liverpool. We auditioned for several weeks till we got the voices. What might be interesting is that the physical contours of these boys, the Ringo we had, for instance, was like 6'3" and 200 and some odd pounds. And after a while, he began to think he was Ringo. They actually began to assume the characters of the Beatles and call each other by the Beatle names. And I think they might have gone into some kind of postpartum depression when the thing was over. But very few people know that we really didn't use the Beatles.
You just burst my balloon. My Beatle balloon is burst. Why does a film like this hold up? Why is it so vital today?
Well, I think, first of all, that music will hold up forever. Second of all, the animation was strange. It was unlike anything Disney did. We worked basically in rectangles, whereas Disney always worked in circles. And it had a different look. And it sort of developed a cult around it. And it does seem to have a longevity. There's one theater in Paris that's still playing it. Never went off the screen.
Al, I feel I know you long enough to ask you this, and I'm going to press, because, you know, I can get kind of nudgy. I want to nudge you. What are you working on now? What's the next animated motion picture? What is going to be happening now?
Well, I can't tell you too much.
What do you mean you can't tell us
I
too
can
much?
tell you this. It'll be out in summer of '88. And
That's not satisfying me.
well, Bruce, you know,
We know each other a few years.
Yeah, yeah.
Can't you let me in? Come on,
This
this
is
is a movie
wonderful.
club.
I hope you're as wonderful next time around with our
This is
new
a movie
production.
club. These people watching are
Yeah.
cinema freaks. They're loving what they're watching.
Well,
Give us
it'll be a
little
nice
bit.
companion piece to the submarine.
I'm not going to take no for an answer. I know you probably not a lot of times, but you know, the movie club, we want to know things in advance. I have to ask you again. The name and what the new motion picture is going to be about. Come on.
You're a terrible nudge, Brucey.
Oh, strawberry fields, strawberries.
1968 was the year in which Lyndon Johnson chose not to run again for president. Richard Nixon defeated Hubert Humphrey on Election Day. In a moment, back to Yellow Submarine with the Beatles.
John Lennon. Brilliant, innovative, irreverent. His music opened our hearts and our minds. And now, 5 years after his tragic death, this legendary performer is remembered by those closest to him. Join Paul McCartney, Julian Lennon, and many others as they recall the life and death of a legend in John Lennon Remembered. Monday at 9 p.m. on Channel 5.
No hell below us.
Isn't this terrific? I told you Yellow Submarine is something special, and we got plenty more to go. You know, I was just sitting here thinking about the first time that I met the Beatles. It was at Idlewild Airport. Now, a lot of you kids out there have said, what's Idlewild Airport? That was Kennedy. Idlewild then became Kennedy Airport. Anyway, they arrived mid-afternoon aboard an airliner from Europe, and they were herded literally into a Pan Am, a makeshift press conference room. And outside, before they got into the press conference room, all heck broke loose. There were thousands of young, nubile females screaming, "We love you, John. We love you, Paul. We love you, Ringo." They were very nervous. And the press seemed to be a little hostile to them. So they got up on their high horse, and they became a little snippy. But they weren't rude or anything. They were just very scared. In fact, after the press conference was over, John said to me, "Cousin Brucey, what is happening here? Do you think we came across rude?" And I said, "Well, you were a little snippy, but I think the press forced them that way. Because at that time, these guys were relaxed, regular kids, 4 mop-top Liverpudlians. And boy, were they excited to be here. And boy, was the crowd excited to see them." The next time I was with the Beatles was probably the most horrifying, scariest time of Cousin Brucey's life. Sid Bernstein asked me to MC and co-host an afternoon with the Beatles at Shea Stadium. It was the summer of 1965. The big Shea Stadium Beatles concert. You know something? I never heard the Beatles sing live. I guess most of you who were lucky enough to be with me in that Shea Stadium concert never heard them either. There was so much noise. It was unbelievable. Ed Sullivan and I were in the, I guess it would be around second base right now. We were ready to introduce the Beatles. They were scared stiff. They were sitting backstage somewhere. It was a dugout somewhere, a makeshift dressing room, and they were really frightening. The audience was kept in the stands by, I think, about 20 or 30 feet of this, this fence that they keep up. 70,000 people in that stadium that day. The Beatles were listening to me. I was broadcasting on the air live on WABC at that time, and they were scared stiff. They heard me announce, matter of fact, this has been shown many times in television. They heard me announce, and now, ladies and gentlemen, here they are from Liverpool. We've been waiting for them, and we want everybody to cooperate. Everybody stay calm, which was a ridiculous statement. In fact, nobody was calm. I wasn't calm. John, Paul, George, and Ringo, the 4 guys came out. Sullivan said to me, "Let's get out of here, Cousin Brucey," which we did. It was a great day. The police, by the way, asked me to help them calm the crowd. Young girls were trying to climb over this 20-foot fence. Their hands were bleeding. People were fainting all over the place. But I'll tell you something interesting happened. Nobody got hurt. Nobody got hurt. It was a great day for the Beatles, for me, and for the crowd out there. I'll never forget the Beatles. So much part of my life and so much part of your life. And we have plenty more to go on Yellow Submarine. So batten down your hatches, and let's take it down 20 fathoms.
And now, back to the Beatles' Yellow Submarine. In a moment, back to Yellow Submarine with the Beatles.
Anybody in the world who knows the name, the Beatles, and loves the Beatles, has heard of the Beatles, or as we all have been affected by the Beatles, there's another name that's very important that touches a warm spot in everyone's heart. The name is Sid Bernstein. Sid, tell us about the very first time you heard about the Beatles, you learned about them, and what made you bring them over here?
It was the fall of 1962. Dr. Max Lerner, columnist for the New York Post and brilliant educator, was teaching a course at the new school. I enrolled for that course. He asked us in October 1962 to read English newspapers as part of the course. And that's how I learned about them, through an English newspaper that I picked up every week and saw the stories go from this way to pageful stories, to headlines that were 80-point bold.
When was the first time you heard them?
I didn't hear them until 4 months after I made that historic call to Brian Epstein.
What prompted you to make that call?
The papers, the stories in the papers, and you couldn't get a record then. Nobody cared about the Beatles here. They were huge there, but nobody cared here. It was difficult to find a record. And it wasn't until I made that first date with Brian Epstein to bring them here a year hence, February '64, that I asked Brian to please send me a record. And Epstein sent me a record, and then I got into their music. But I made the deal for Carnegie Hall a couple of months before I heard the first record.
Did you know when you heard that record what was going to happen worldwide, internationally?
No one knew, not even Brian Epstein, who had an intuition about these people, but no one knew. It was just something we needed. It filled the gap, it filled the vacuum that the late John Kennedy left. And it was open for young, attractive foremen to fill a gap, to erase some of the unhappiness, to put some smiles back on the face of the earth, particularly amongst young people.
Sid, how about a Beatle portrait of all the boys? Describe them for us.
George, very serious, very studied, and in a depth that doesn't seem to come out. Ringo, funny, and at times very serious. Light, nice man. Paul, delightful man. Outgoing, cordial, happy, attractive, nice person. John, the most serious, the most interesting, the most fascinating, the most unusual, the most undisciplined, and one of our great, great talents of all time.
Sid, we all have our favorite Beatles stories. Tell us yours.
My favorite up story is John calling me at home. I was presenting Jimmy Cliff, the reggae king, at Carnegie Hall. It was sold out, and he needed 3 tickets. And so I asked Adam, Dylan, and Denise, my 3 older ones, would they give up their tickets for John Lennon? And they graciously did. And so John came with 2 friends and sat next to Jerry and I, my wife and I, and we had the most delightful 2 hours talking about music, enjoying Jimmy Cliff, and talking about Shea Stadium. He says, Sid, I saw the top of the mountain when we played Shea.